Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful morning. Not only is it a beautiful morning, it's so beautiful, I want to talk about how beautiful it is. And that's going to be the nature of my talk about today, is how beautiful this world is and how beautiful this morning is and how beautiful everything is. So that way, I don't have to just introduce it, I can actually dive into it. Why am I talking about how beautiful the world is? Because this Shabbat is a very special day. This Saturday, the Shabbat, is the 10th of Shvat. And the 10th of Shvat is the day that in 1950, the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneersohn, passed away. And the Rebbe in 1951, on that exact day, which would have been the first anniversary of his passing, took on the mantle of leadership of the Chabad movement. And when he took on the mantle of leadership, the way you do that is with a mimer, with saying a Chassidic discourse, an original, somewhat original, but connected discourse. The last discourse, the last mimer that the previous Rebbe said was based on the Song of Songs, a quote from the Song of Songs about this beautiful world, that this world is a beautiful garden. And so the way the Rebbe continued passing on that tradition is he started his discourse with that same verse. And then every single year of his entire leadership, on this day, he would mark this day by doing another discourse on the same theme. So, what I want to do is not necessarily go through the gamut of this discourse, but give you an idea in Kabbalah and in Hasidic philosophy, what is this beautiful world and what does it all mean? The words that the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe used, and the Rebbe used were the words Basi LeGani. It's from Song of Songs. It means I have come to my garden. In Song of Songs, what God is doing is declaring, I've come to my garden. But what is a garden? And what is God referring to as I've come to my garden? And the fact that this world is a garden. So Kabbalah explains that this world, this very physical, material world that we live in, is a garden. Now, I want to contrast that with how many other words can be used to describe this world, or how many other words people generally use to describe this world. Oh, it's rough, it's tough, it's what a place, what a da 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 da. I mean, right? You know what I'm talking about. This constant, negativity that is throughout our world. And imagine the premise, imagine the thesis, imagine your core idea of what is this world. This world is a garden. If you walk through the world every single day, as difficult as the day can be, I know some of you are on your commute now, as difficult as the commute can be, the road rage, and you look at the world and say, this is my garden. It's a garden. This is the world that I live in. Now, what does it mean by this world as a garden? So Kabbalah says that this is where God desires to live, not in the highest heavens, not in the supernal realms, but here in the everyday world. Originally, when the world was created, God's presence was openly revealed. But in the beginning, and I think this is going back to and understanding where the nature of this idea comes from, is in the beginning, the garden wasn't so, well, it was very beautiful. It was the Garden of Eden. But God's presence was driven away by a series of sins. The first was what is called the original sin, Adam and Eve eating from the fruit of the forbidden tree, the tree of knowledge. And then every single generation drove God's presence further away. God wanted to be in this world, but slowly through people making choices, God became ever less present in this world. Just as God created the world with the vision that it would serve as his home, that this is where God wanted to dwell, God also had a clear vision of how this world would be created. He envisioned a world characterized by frightful spiritual blackness, where creations that possessed free choice, capable of embracing the darkness or rejecting the darkness, that these free choice characters, creations, would repress the darkness and ultimately transform it into light. That was the idea, to live in a world that looked like it was dark, but say to the world and its creations, you have free choice, but I want to tell you, darkness is not a creation. It's just the absence of light. And you have one simple job. You're going to cut through the darkness. You're going to stop getting bogged down. You're going to stop getting sunk into the darkness. You're going to look through it and see that it's not really there, because it's not a creation of its own. And you're going to go beyond it. And by going beyond it, you are going to turn it and transform it into light. There must be a world which, on the surface, is inhospitable to its creator. And through the difficult work of banishing and transforming the darkness, it becomes a beautiful garden. So using the word garden is beautiful. I always think of that book that I read as a child, The Secret Garden, and thinking about that imagery of this beautiful, this majestic garden. But what do we know about the garden? If you want a beautiful garden, for all of you that have a green thumb, it takes a lot of work. You got to cut away the weeds. You got to work the soil. You got to turn the soil. You got to plant whatever you want to plant. You got to water it. You got to be on top of it. Make sure that it doesn't dry out. That's what the garden is. So the world is a beautiful garden. But the garden that is so beautiful needs people to tend to it. And that, I think, becomes the greatest metaphor for what our place is in this world. We are the garden tenders. We are the ones that work through the soil. We're the ones that water the plants. We're the ones to make sure that the weeds don't grow so it messes up the beautiful flowers. And then it's God that gets to walk through the garden in delight and inhabit the garden. This is, in essence, the beginning of the Rebbe's talk on Basi LeGani and on this world. And then the Rebbe continues and says, Abraham came into this world of which God's presence had been almost completely removed, not entirely, but almost entirely removed. from the garden and began to reverse the tide. Abraham's job was to bring the Shekhinah, that's the term in Kabbalah, which is referred to God's presence, to bring God's presence back down here. And the next generation, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, the 12 tribes, generation by generation, until the 7th generation from Abraham. Abraham, the direct 7th generation, it was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. This is the patriarchal lineage. There's also a matriarchal lineage. Jacob then would have been Levi, then Kahas, then Amram, and the 7th generation is Moses. Moses is the 7th generation from Abraham. And then the Rebbe would say all sevenths are precious. And at the giving of the Torah, that is going to be recreated and relived in next week's Torah portion. The giving of the Torah, God returns to this world just like before in the Garden of Eden, to full grandeur. It says in next week's Torah portion, and God descended upon Mount Sinai. And through this, though the revelation at Mount Sinai was temporary, a few months later, God graced the newly constructed tabernacle that we talk about in the following Torah portion. And once the tabernacle was built, and later the temple was built, the Shekhinah, God's presence, was here to stay. And God said, I have come to my garden. But here's what's interesting. Moses' incredible achievement just got the ball rolling. God's desire is to establish a home in this world. And actually, we are part of that. It's not enough that there's God's presence. The Shekhinah is manifest within the confines of the tabernacle. That's not enough. And later, the temple in Jerusalem. Ultimately, what God wants in this beautiful garden is a grand plan that calls for the entire world, every inch, every meter of it, to be a welcoming home, a garden of pleasure for its creator. That this entire world becomes a beautiful place, a place of peace, a place of spirituality, a place where we don't see competition, we see collaboration. A beautiful place. The tabernacle that was constructed by Moses served as the template for the sanctuary, for the tabernacle that is inside each and every one of us, that we are expected to create for God in our hearts. Actually, if you look at the verse where God tells the Israelites, the Jewish people, to erect a sanctuary, it says the following: the asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. I'm going to translate this for you. They shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them. You see a problem with the grammar here? They shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them. So I will dwell in it. But that's not what the Torah says. And the Torah, every letter, every word is exact. The implications here of it being in the plural form, I will dwell in them, teaches us the most important element that we can understand about God's presence in this world. That God desires to dwell in each and every one of our hearts. That God wants to dwell within us. So we turn to the tabernacle, which is the prototype of a divine dwelling place. And we look at that for a better understanding of how to accomplish our mission and our purpose in this world. Our purpose of repressing and transforming the darkness and creating a personal human sanctuary for God by bringing light into this world. Now, what was the tabernacle? What was the Mishkan? What was the primary thing that was done there? It was the offering of sacrifices. Practically, and I'm just going to preface this by saying we cannot relate to this because it's just, we can't relate to it. But I will tell you that, and I want to not dwell on animal sacrifices, but dwell on what the metaphor is and what it means for us. So practically, it meant taking an animal, slaughtering it, and then offering it or parts of it on the altar. And then the heavenly fire would descend and consume it. That's animal sacrifices. We can have a conversation about that at a different time. What does it mean for you and I? What is the spiritual equivalent? What the spiritual equivalent is, according to Kabbalah, it's really talking about the animal within. The selfish, animalistic urges and desires that are within us. Each one of us has these animalistic desires. We also have a godly soul, which is ablaze with a heavenly fire, a passionate, indistinguishable love for God. And so through making this world a garden, through making this world a home for God, we can consume our inner animal with this fire. The inner animal is selfish, and it can be made to understand that a relationship with God is in its most selfish interest too. You bring the animal, you don't destroy the animal. You need the animal. It's our passion. It's our excitement. It's got a lot there that we need. So you bring the animal to the altar. You say, animal, it is in your best interest to make this world a garden, to make this world a beautiful place. There's nothing as sweet. There's nothing as wondrous. There's nothing as filling as a relationship with a higher power. By being an active part of making this world a better place. In Hebrew, the word for sacrifice is karban. Literally, karban, kirov, comes from the word kiruv. It means to come close. How do you come close to God? By transforming your inner darkness into light. A light that then shines forth and illuminates the entire world. By bringing all of the animals, all of the different parts of yourself that may be animalistic to the altar and transforming them. The material that was used to create the tabernacle's walls was acacia wood. Now, this takes the concept of the transformation from darkness to, I think, a more profound level. And here is a Kabbalistic idea that I haven't spoken about before. In Hebrew, the word for acacia wood is shittim, which is related to the word shtut, which means folly. Both these words, shittim and shtut, they share the same etymological root. the Hebrew word that means folly or straying. Folly is a form of straying. There's a proper and there's a straight path. There's one that's dictated by rationale, by logic, and someone who acts foolishly has wandered off the path of reason. According to the Talmud talks about this and says that all sins, anything that a person does that is not on the proper path, is caused by a spirit of folly that takes over the person. Because no human, remember, the world is a garden, and we're all beautiful souls. So no beautiful soul in their right mind is willing to sever their relationship with a higher power, even temporarily. This is the premise that we're starting off with, that we're all incredible. We're all amazing. We're all incredibly spiritual, beautiful souls. This world is a garden. And why would a beautiful, incredible soul want to sever a relationship with a higher power, even temporarily, in order to indulge in a fleeting desire or a fleeting whim? And then there are more global follies. There are different universal conventions that are the de facto situation, regardless of whether they are wise or whether they make any sense. And God tells us that he wants us to create a sanctuary for him out of these follies. He wants us to take our capacity to act irrationally and dedicate it to a higher power, to stray from the path of rationality, but in the opposite direction. Is it possible to apprehend the unapprehendable? The problem with trying to relate to God through logic and intellect lies in the fact that we are not sufficiently wise enough to be able to grasp God, because God transcends intellect. We're just creations. We can't, there's parts of things that we'll never understand. There's things that go on in the world. Bad things happen to good people. There's things that we'll never truly understand. So by just having an intellectual conversation or an intellectual connection and relationship with a higher power, it's going to bring us to places that are going to be very difficult. Ultimately, we relate to God through, according to Kabbalah, the abnegation of ourselves, which means including our mental capacities and foolishly submitting ourselves, foolishly meaning folly, using that term, to a higher power, and to transform the folly of this world into a holy folly. And so this is how Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak concludes the thought. He says the following: and he shall see the realization of the verse that I will dwell in them. Godliness will shine in his soul. And this is what it says in the Zohar: when the other side, unholiness, is suppressed through a person succeeding in transforming the folly of the animal soul and worldly passions into holiness for the purpose of doing a mitzvah or studying Torah, that transcendent glory of God is revealed in all the worlds, and the very highest levels of divinity are revealed and shine bright. This is how he ends it. You're probably thinking to yourself, what does that mean? Every single year, the Rebbe elaborated on this. That's how much was packed into that rich statement. And so what I want to do is, if I have a few minutes more, I want to just go through some of the core ideas of that statement and try to see how they connect to you and I. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak identified the reason why Moses was privileged to bring the Shekhinah, to bring the divine presence into the physical world. He said it was because he was the seventh. The Rebbe said, we too are the seventh. We are the seventh generation. Moses, the seventh generation, and he finally was able to bring the Shekhinah, the divine presence, into this world. And it's our job in this generation to complete the job. And this began a conversation about what is called the Mashiach. This word has gotten a bad rap by different people, but the idea that it's our job to actively usher in a redemption, an era of peace and tranquility. And that is the spiritual task on a global level of our generation. To draw down godliness in a way, truly, in this world, transforming the folly of the animal soul, transforming the passions, the desires, into a folly of holiness. Using all of the things that are in this world. Think of technology right now. Look at what we're doing right this second through technology. This could be a folly, or it can be a folly of holiness, and we are choosing for it to be a folly of holiness. Now, here's the question that I've had. Why us? Why me? Choose somebody else. Why this generation? Why now? I don't think we're any greater than any of the previous generations. Actually, I would say the opposite. So why us? And the Rebbe explains that the sages were precise in their wording, that all sevenths are cherished. They didn't say all those who are cherished are seventh. They said all sevenths are cherished, meaning to say, being seventh is not a status that you achieve by virtue of being precious. It's that the seventh's quality lies simply in the fact that the seventh is seventh. And the seventh is cherished not on account of anything that we did, but because we are chosen to be precious. We're born into it. On the other hand, the fact that the seventh is considered so precious in itself points to the greatness of the first. It's something I talk about a lot. It's that we have to see ourselves as a link in the chain. If we don't see ourselves as a link in the chain, then we miss the entire point. We're only great because of those who came before us. But because we are now here, we have the ability to make this world a better place. But let's take a look for a moment into who was the first. The first was Abraham. In order to understand the greatness of Abraham, the Rebbe contrasts Abraham with another great spiritual leader, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was thoroughly taken over with a love for God. Because of his instance on teaching Torah to the masses, he was sentenced by the Romans to a horrible death. I don't want to go into the details, but it was very terrible, terrible death that he had. His students who were watching saw, as he was being killed by the Romans, he had a beautiful smile on his holy face. And they turned to Rabbi Akiva while he's being killed. And they say, Rabbi Akiva, how is it possible to endure such torture with a smile? They were crying. Rabbi Akiva responded, My entire life, he said, I have awaited the moment when I could sanctify God's name, constantly asking myself, when will I be afforded the opportunity to make this ultimate sacrifice? And now that the opportunity is here, should I not smile? To Rabbi Akiva, he felt his philosophy on life. You can agree with him or not agree with him, but take him for who he is. His philosophy on life was that no soul can reach a greater height than through Mesirat Nefesh, through sanctifying God's name through martyrdom. Abraham was different. Abraham's Mesirat Nefesh, Abraham's sacrifice, was incidental, not something he actively pursued. He knew that his objective was to proclaim and to publicize God's name. It says in Leviticus, Abraham proclaimed the name of God. Our sages said that you don't read I said Leviticus, I meant Vayikra. You don't read the word Vayikra, he proclaimed, but you read the word Vayakri, that he made others proclaim. That Abraham didn't suffice with proclaiming it himself. He saw to it that the people he influenced should proclaim God's name to others. That was his objective, nothing else. And if in the course sacrifice was called for, Mesirat Nefesh was called for, he was prepared to do that too. But he had no personal aspirations, not even the loftiest aspirations. The connection to God was achieved for him through sacrifice, through Mesirat Nefesh. And so great was Abraham that Moses was privileged to have the Torah given to him because he was the seventh from Abraham. It was only because of Abraham's sacrifice that Moses had the privilege to be able to receive the Torah. And when Moses once thought to compare himself to Abraham, God chastised him. God said, do not stand in the place of the great ones. You are great, but greatness came before you. And now the Rebbe continues. Now that you understand the past, and now that you understand where we are in this world, and now you understand how precious is the seventh generation, us, you and I, our capacity to consummate the process of making this world into a divine home is due to the fact that we are connected to the past. All of the self-sacrifice, everything, and I don't have to go through the past to tell you about what that means, Mesirat Nefesh. All of the Mesirat Nefesh that has been given up for the sake of a higher power, for the sake of making this world a better place. We now stand on the shoulders of giants. And because we're on their shoulders, we can see higher, we can see further. We're on the shoulders of generations of giants. And because we're on their shoulders, we see a world, a beautiful world. What has been given to us is some of the greatest things that have ever been given to humanity. And going back, I know you're thinking even physically, even spiritually. And so in the spirit of Abraham, our job is to arrive in a place where there's nothing known of godliness. And today we can do it without even leaving our home. Where there's nothing known of spirituality. Where there's not even an alphabet that's known. And while there, setting ourselves completely aside and devoting ourselves to the mission at hand. This became the mission statement. You can see today what the Chabad outreach has become. Literally, Chabad rabbis and rebbetzins in every little nook and cranny of this entire world. Wherever there is something, there's Chabad. It used to be, Senator Lieberman said, wherever there's Coca-Cola, there's Chabad. Now there's Chabad in more places than Coke. So you can't even say that anymore. And that's our job, and we have the ability. Never in the history of humanity has there been more connection to God, more connection to Jewishness in every single nook and cranny of the world, in every place, than there is today. It's an unbelievable thing that the entire world today is filled with godliness. And our job is not to be selfish. If we know an Aleph, we teach an Aleph. What does that mean? You didn't even learn Bet yet. You didn't even learn the second letter. Why you think you're so great that you can, all you did is learn one letter in the whole Hebrew alphabet and you can now teach it? Yes, that's our job. Whatever little bit that we know, our job is to teach it. And this became the mission statement in 1951 that now carries through today, and you can see it so clearly. This is what's demanded and requested of each and every one of us. Being the seventh, being the fact that all sevenths are cherished, that although the fact that we are in the seventh generation, it's not a result of our choosing. It's not a result of anything we did. Maybe, the Rebbe would say, it's even in certain ways contrary to our will. But all sevenths are cherished, and we are here. We happen to be in this generation. And you can look at this generation, and you can say, oh my gosh, I can't believe what is being left. I can't believe what this world has come to. And a lot of people say that. This is not the attitude of the Rebbe, and this is, at this time, this Saturday, this Shabbat, that will be Yud Shvat. If there's one attitude change, one thing that we can do is just change our attitude. Say, this is a beautiful day. This is a beautiful world. This beautiful world is God's garden, and I am here to tend it. Why? Why am I the tender? Because God decided that my soul is going to come into the world now, during this time, and I can get sucked into it. I can get lost in it, and I can start going through the headlines every single day and say, oh my gosh, this is crazy, this is nuts, this is insanity. Or I can say, oh my gosh, this is a beautiful day. This is a beautiful world. This is a beautiful garden. There's a couple weeds. I'll pull them out. I'm chosen to be the tender of this garden. How lucky am I to be living in this time, in this place? How lucky am I to be living that literally I'm sitting in my living room and I'm being able to sit and study in the comfort of my home with this beautiful technology that exists that people could not even imagine. Even 50 years ago, forget about 100 or 200 or 500 years ago. And this is the time that we live in, a time that through our home, literally we can touch and we can hear. We are from different corners of the world, from all over the world, in one room, having the same conversation at the same time. This is Mashiach. And it's our job to cut through all of the nonsense and the darkness. Darkness was never created. It's the absence of light. It's our job to not get lost in the darkness, but to see the light. And by us fulfilling our spiritual task, we are going to bring the essence of the Shekhinah in the lowest part of this world. We're going to actively uplift this world, make this world a better place. And with that, we continue their legacy, and we continue our own legacy. And Hashem should bless each and every one of us. That as someone who's in the West Coast right now is writing, the sun is coming up as you shared this. It's a beautiful day. The sun is rising, and it is a beautiful day. And it will be a beautiful day tomorrow and the next day. And every single day that we're given this beautiful day, we are given it to tend the garden. And may we fulfill that mission and that purpose of tending the garden beautifully and wonderfully and make this garden ever so majestic, more majestic than anyone could ever have imagined. With that, I bless you, each and every one of you, to not get sucked in to the darkness. It was never created. Don't get sucked into it. It's a beautiful day. The world is a beautiful place. The world is a garden. And we are so grateful and fortunate to be able to be here and to be able to tend to it.